If President Trump's tariff war was intended solely to destroy China, then he may have succeeded already. In barely 6 weeks, US restrictions have paralyzed the empire into a barren wasteland of shuttered factories, billions lost and entire cities abandoned. But how did a single sanction cause entire factory cities to shut down almost overnight? And is it really game over for the Republic? To truly grasp China's downfall, we must trace its origins from the very genesis. It all began with a single speech, a moment broadcast live to the world. On April 2, 2025, President Donald Trump, standing before the American flag, delivered a message that shattered the foundations of the global economy. Simple yet brutal. All imports into the United States were placed on a 10% tariff, effective immediately. But this was just the beginning. He went against common logic by placing an additional 34% tariff on Chinese goods in what was a calculated strike at the heart of the world's largest manufacturing powerhouse. He wasn't concerned that the United States buys much more from China than it sells to China, with a difference of about $145 billion. As a matter of fact, President Trump believes the US has been taken advantage of by cheaters and pillaged by foreigners, and opined that tariffs will encourage US consumers to buy more American-made goods, increase the amount of tax raised, and lead to huge levels of investment. His big idea is to trim the gap between the value of goods America buys from other nations and those it exports to them. And yet, not even this was the final blow. The tariff soared to a crushing 145% on specific Chinese products within weeks, triggering chaos in the world's economy. Global investors panicked, markets tumbled, and China's once dominant electronics sector bled. The industry lost billions upon billions in 48 hours, with tech giants like Huawei, Xiaomi, and Lenovo seeing their stock prices nosedive by over 20%. What was once a symbol of China's technology might now crumble under the weight of sanctions. But this brings us to the lingering question: how did this happen so quickly? And is a single policy so powerful it could lead to such chaos? Well, put simply, yes. The tariff policy is extremely dicey because factories are the lifeblood of China's economy. It sends everything crashing down like a deck of cards. Take the Republic's sprawling tech hub Shenzhen, for instance. Dubbed China's very own Silicon Valley, Shenzhen serves as the base for several technology firms, including the telecom giant Huawei Technologies, electric vehicle manufacturer BYD, and leading drone producer DJI. Yet exports from Shenzhen firms fell 16.6% to $50.8 billion in the first quarter of the year, contrasting sharply with the 2.3% gain in exports registered nationally during the same period. The slump was driven by a 29.6% drop in general trade, which accounts for the majority of the city's exports. Remember Foxconn's massive iPhone plant, one of the largest Apple assembly sites in the world. Production screeched to a halt, with reports claiming jaw-dropping slumps in shipping volume. Revenue also reduced by 12%, but the damage didn't stop at the factory gates. Foot traffic at Shenzhen's famed Huashan Bay Market, the world's largest electronics bazaar, drastically plunged, with thriving vendors now facing empty aisles and dying businesses. Local media reported businesses desperately hoarding materials, fearing a collapse in orders. With China pushed to the wall, a quick retaliation was only a matter of time. Beijing went all out with an 84% tariff on all US imports just days after Trump's announcement. But this wasn't just a routine response. China's counterattack targeted the heart of global technology, focusing on semiconductors and rare earth metals, materials essential for everything from smartphones to military hardware. Sounds smart, right? Well, there was one major problem. In trying to wound America with a double-edged sword, China cut itself. The rare earth metal ban, which included materials like lithium, cobalt, and neodymium, crippled its own supply chain. America is kind of like her biggest customer, so cutting her off meant factories in Shenzhen that had once buzzed with life suddenly became ghost towns. Workers who once worked around the clock were now idle, jobless, and struggling. And as the world watched, it became clear that this wasn't just a trade dispute, it was an economic war, and China was struggling to survive the opening blows. You see, thousands of export-oriented small factories in or near Guangzhou have played a central role in the country's rapid economic development over the past half-century. As the commercial hub of southeastern China, these small factories are quick to supply almost any manufactured product at a low cost. But when they fall silent, cities don't just lose the hum of machinery, they lose their heartbeat, their soul, the very fabric of the economy. That was the reality for China's industrial powerhouses like Dongguan and Foshan, both of which turned from bustling economic hubs into spooky ghost towns almost overnight. And the worst part is that the lost orders are also impacting jobs. Workers who had flocked to these industrial hubs from rural provinces, chasing the promise of a better life, now find themselves packing their bags in despair. Some return home where the cost of living is lower but opportunities are few. Others are now traveling into smaller communes searching for work that no longer exists. For now, Chinese manufacturers are pausing production and turning to new markets as the impact of US tariffs sets in. But we're looking at a major collapse in the nation's workforce. In 2024 alone, China exported approximately $18.39 billion in apparel to the United States, representing 22% of the total apparel imports in the US from its top 15 exporting partners. Now that American customers are canceling orders at the last minute, clothing factory managers are saddled with losses, and managers of factories making machinery wonder whether their low costs will help them survive, and workers hope they will still have jobs in the coming weeks and months. Several garment factories focused on the US market have temporarily shut down, with owners waiting for clarity on tariffs. Meanwhile, managers and many other factories are scrambling to secure buyers in other countries or attract customers within China. Personally, it's not looking good. Goldman Sachs estimates that between 10 and 20 million workers in China are employed in export businesses targeting the United States, out of the country's 473 million urban workers last year. Given this scale, it's no surprise that Ash Munger, founder and CEO of Guangzhou-based Imex Sourcing Services, described the impact of the recent tariff hike as way bigger than the COVID-19 pandemic. Real estate developers who invested heavily in constructing residential and commercial properties near industrial hubs were left with vacant buildings and falling property values. Meanwhile, state-owned banks financing this construction boom faced a looming crisis as factory owners defaulted on their loans. For small businesses with limited resources, the sudden surge in tariffs could be overwhelming, potentially driving them out of business. Owners have tried slashing prices, offering discounts, or doing anything to keep their doors open, but without customers, their struggles were in vain. Reports show that in just 3 months, an unprecedented number of businesses in Dongguan either shut down or faced massive financial losses. But the devastation didn't end at the city limits. As Chinese manufacturing hubs collapsed, a wave of panic swept through global supply chains. Companies that had relied on China's manufacturing power began to question their dependence on a single country. Giants like Samsung and Dell saw the warning signs. They began a swift and decisive shift, relocating their production lines to India, Vietnam, and Mexico. But perhaps the most shocking move of all came from Apple, a brand synonymous with Chinese manufacturing, which has now begun moving a significant portion of its iPhone production to India. They produced iPhones worth $22 billion in India during the 12 months ending in March, marking a nearly 60% increase in production compared to the previous year. But like that wasn't bad enough, the Cupertino, California headquartered company now produces around 20% of its iPhones in South Asia, equivalent to 1 in every 5 devices, according to sources who requested anonymity because the information is not public. The ramp-up suggests the iPhone maker and its suppliers are accelerating a pivot to India from China, a move that began after strict COVID lockdowns disrupted production at Apple's largest facility. Most of these India-made iPhones are assembled at Foxconn Technology Group's plant in southern India. Tata Group's electronics division, which acquired Wistron Corp and manages Pegatron Corp's operations, also plays a significant role in Apple's supply chain. The writing is on the wall, and the message, guys, has never been any clearer. China is no longer indispensable as the world's reliable factory. Sure, they're still the undisputed leaders in global manufacturing, but it's only a matter of time before others take a share of the pie. The United States is already taking significant steps to reduce its economic reliance on China through strategic long-term initiatives aimed at reshaping its manufacturing and trade landscape. One of them is the CHIPS and Science Act, which allocates over $50 billion to revive the US semiconductor industry. The goal here is to reduce the dependence on Chinese-made technology, particularly in areas like advanced computing and microchips, which are essential for everything from consumer electronics to military hardware. Vice President J.D. Vance, for one, justifies tariffs by promising parents that Americans will have American-made weapons if, God forbid, they go to war. Another key strategy America is implementing is friend sharing, an approach where manufacturing is shifted away from China to more trusted allied countries. A good example of this came in 2023 when Mexico became the top exporter to the US, surpassing China. And then there's the move of private companies responding to the pressures of the tariff war by relocating production away from China. Companies like Mattel and Apple, for example, have already moved a good amount of manufacturing to other countries to avoid high tariffs and mitigate disruptions in their supply chains. All these actions combine into a comprehensive strategy for the US. But for the millions of Chinese workers who once formed the backbone of these factories, the consequences are devastating. But what do you think? Could China stage a massive comeback despite the impact of these tariffs? As we witness this economic struggle play out in real time, one thing that's clear is that the future remains unpredictable. Staying informed is the only thing within our control, so if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.